The irony was brutal. The male chemists and supervisors in the factory, those who handled the raw, concentrated radium powder, used lead-lined protective screens, tongs, and wore heavy aprons. They knew the risks. But the young, female laborers who ingested the material daily were given no warnings and no protection. The company placed a higher value on the speed and precision of their work than on their lives. In 1922, the war was over, the factory floors were still humming, but the whispers had begun. It started innocently enough, persistent, agonizing toothaches that no dentist could cure. Then unexplained anemia and constant fatigue. Grace Fryer noticed that Catherine Schaub, one of her closest friends, had a tooth extracted and the socket simply refused to heal. The gum tissue began to slough away, revealing bone that was slowly dissolving. The first gruesome diagnosis was often radium necrosis of the jaw, a shattering condition where the jawbone literally disintegrated from the inside out. The medical term was chilling, but the reality was worse. Bones began to break spontaneously. One girl simply stood up from her chair and fractured her spine. Their gait became shambling. Their once vibrant skin turned a pallid gray. When the girls went to the company doctor, they were met with indifference and cruel dismissal. The company's paid physicians assured them that their symptoms were likely due to poor hygiene, rheumatism, or even, in a vicious attempt to silence and shame them, the result of sexually transmitted diseases. They blamed the victims to protect their valuable patent. When one of the painters, Amelia Maggia, died after months of terrible suffering, her death certificate cited syphilis. The corporate cover-up solidified. The USRC hid or destroyed every internal memo and study that suggested radium was the culprit. But the radium did not hide. It continued to glow, a faint, lingering death sentence, shining from the bodies of the sick and the shallow graves of the dead. The girls, those who survived, were left with a terrible, slow realization. They hadn't been working with a miracle cure. They'd been working with a silent assassin. And they realized that to survive, they would have to face a far more powerful, unseen enemy than the element itself. The ruthless power of American industry, which had knowingly and callously sealed their fate for profit. Grace Fryer, now suffering and desperate, began the long, impossible search for a lawyer brave enough to fight a corporation that believed it was above the law. The battle for justice was just beginning.
The air in the United States Radium Corporation, USRC, factory in Orange, New Jersey, smelled faintly of paint thinner and excitement. World War I had turned the small industrial town into a hub of patriotic fervor, and the young women who worked here knew they were doing their part. They were dial painters, not factory hands, they corrected anyone who asked. Their work was precise, artisanal, and crucial to the war effort. They were responsible for making the luminous faces on military watches, aircraft gauges, and ship styles glow in the dark, guiding American soldiers through the trenches and the night skies. The company referred to the luminous substance as undark, but the women knew its real name, radium. It was the miracle element of the age, the discovery that had won Marie and Pierre Curie the Nobel Prize. It was used in health tonics, toothpastes, and cosmetics, promising vitality and youth. In the factory, radium was simply a fine, white, magical powder that, when mixed with glue and zinc sulfide, lit up the world. And it lit up their lives. For a young woman in 1917, the job was a stunning opportunity. It paid roughly 3 times the rate of typical factory work, around $20 a week, and the environment was clean and bustling with feminine camaraderie. Here, they were not constrained by the soot and grime of traditional industrial labor. They were artists, patriots, and in the quiet hours after the factory bell rang, they were faintly luminous. It was this latter quality that filled their days and nights with a whimsical, ghostly beauty. The radium dust clung to everything: their hair, the plush seats of the trolley cars, the threads of their cotton smocks. At night, they would stand in front of mirrors and see their skin glimmer. They painted the powder onto their eyelashes before a dance and dusted it onto their teeth to make their smiles twinkle in the dark movie theaters. They were literally glowing. The USRC management encouraged this playful familiarity with the material. They told the women that radium was not only safe, but good for them. The women were told tales of spa treatments in Europe where people bathed in radioactive water. Radium, they were assured, was a therapeutic substance. This was the dazzling, deadly lie. One of the most diligent painters was Grace Fryer, a spirited, independent girl who needed the money and prided herself on her meticulous brushwork. Like the others, Grace was taught the technique that made their work both necessary and lethal: lip pointing. The fine camel hair brushes used to paint the tiny numerals on the dials quickly lost their shape. To achieve the necessary razor-sharp point, the foreman instructed the girls to bring the brush to their lips, use their tongue to draw a fine point, dip it back into the undark mixture, and apply it to the dial. "Just kiss the brush," the managers would say. "It saves time." With every kiss, a tiny, invisible dose of radium entered their bodies. It was a slow, deliberate poisoning, sanctioned and even enforced by the very men who had hired them. Unknown to the girls, radium is what chemists call an bone seeker. Once ingested, the body mistakes it for calcium and deposits the radioactive substance directly into the bone marrow and skeletal structure. From there, the radium begins its slow, insidious work. It bombards the bones with alpha particles, intensely destructive radiation that shreds DNA, destroys tissue, and, most critically, annihilates the cells responsible for producing blood.